All right, guys. We are here. We are live. Welcome to I'm going to call us Poker Life Podcast. Joined today by a man who is one of the most interesting men in poker, one of the most vocal men in poker, somebody that the people have been waiting to hear from regarding the Pokerstars VIP changes that I've been talking with Dani Stern on the podcast about. And I'm very happy he's able to join me on the podcast today. Dani Negreanu, welcome. What's going on, man?
Well, what's going on? Oh, nothing really. No, I don't know. I've been a slow news week, I guess. A little slow couple of weeks. Nothing really going on in poker. Now, of course, obviously, what's going on is what's been going on for, I don't know, how long has it been since they announced it? Maybe 6 weeks or 2 months now, it feels like.
And I think it was, in theory, it might have been good if it was that long ago, but I think it was
November. Duh.
Yeah, early November, yeah.
It's been about a month. Yeah, it's been about a month of that. It's been probably one of the most busy months I've had. Aside from that stuff, went through a stretch where I did the Hearthstone thing. I flew to Anaheim. I came back. I was asked to induct Jennifer Harmon and John Juan both into the Hall of Fame. Then I did the commentary for the main event. And then I did an event for Universal Studios right after that, like for 3 days. And then, of course, the premiere in Toronto. So I've been kind of really busy, aside from what has been taking up a lot of my time, which is discussing these changes with the higher ups and the people that be about, and just trying to convey to them really what's happening in terms of the bigger picture of what these changes mean.
Sounds like you've had quite a busy last couple of weeks then, man.
Yeah, you could say stressful for sure, frustrating at times. Just not how I like. One of the things in the documentary it says is one of my favorite quotes, and it says, "To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing." And that's just not how I live my life.
That doesn't sound like you. No.
No, that's just not how I live my life. And so during this whole thing, obviously I think it's important that, I've been careful about what's going on behind the scenes. There's some things that just are better kept there so that progress can be made. But of course, I feel like it's been enough time now where I should be able to talk about some of the stuff, maybe without some of the nitty gritty details, but overall just having people understand where I sit on it and my views on the entire thing.
Yeah, I think that's what people have been asking for. They sort of want, you talked about making a blog post a couple weeks ago, was sort of the first response you made to a lot of people on Twitter. And I guess people have been waiting for that blog post. So they've just been waiting for you to sort of come out publicly and talk more about the changes, obviously, because you're sort of you're basically the voice of Pokerstars. No one else with Pokerstars is really communicating on the forums. There's been a couple posts, but there's really a back and forth communication between the players and Pokerstars. So you're sort of you're the liaison. You're the one that can, tell people what's going on sort of behind the scenes and what your view on things is.
Right. I remember I was careful with the wording. My target date was roughly around November 15th to write a blog, because really the blog, or what I wanted to discuss, hinges upon sort of whatever kind of discussions that go on behind the scenes about maybe some revisions, maybe some adjustments, maybe some new announcements that can be released that haven't been because I'd like to say that I think that the past year, especially in regards to these changes, but really stemming from October 2014, the communication has been, for lack of a better word, absolutely freaking horrendous, totally horrendous. I don't believe, I guess the big issue from their side is, and you've heard this before, that players were warned, right? Because in October 2014, it said there was a newsletter that said something to the effect of, Pokerstars is considering substantial changes to the VIP program in 2016. I don't remember any emails being sent, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that any were throughout the year that, this was coming. And so my response to that would be, what if somebody signed up in February, went on our website, looked at what Supernova Elite is and said, oh, this looks like a good promotion. Let me try this. They weren't warned. How can you argue that they were adequately warned?
Right.
If you really consider the newsletter, and I just really think from a company's perspective, the approach is wrong in terms of messaging, because this isn't a question of where you come from. I would call an arrogant place and say, well, you were warned. No, you weren't adequately warned. I think this is a place where you have to acknowledge, first and foremost, that if you are trying to implement these things, it's a broken promise. And that's essentially what, I've been discussing this for a month with a lot of different people, myself, people in the business world as well, outside of poker. And, I understand that legally they're allowed to do this, of course. People talk about lawsuits and all that. I know from this, they're basically drawing dead. There's no way to there's nothing that could come of going that angle, just wasted time. Because, there's other industries that do this, right? The airlines, they change their, they change their frequent flyer mile structure all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to be known like the airlines are? Because I don't know anyone who goes, I love the airlines, right? That's a separate question. But in terms of, this being what it is and calling a spade, if they continue with this and it doesn't get reversed, it is a broken promise. It's, do X in 2015, you will receive Y in 2016. Up until November 5th or 12th, I believe, it said so in plain English on the website, what your value would get. So to not honor that is a broken promise. And I've heard arguments to the contrary or whatever, and we have a major disagreement on that, to say the least.
So you've been in direct communication with David Bazoff from what is he, the CEO of Pokerstar, CEO of Amaya right now?
Yeah, David, Eric, Holreiser, Severin, who's the poker room manager. I've talked to everybody, sort of gone back and forth on, what's possible. Because I want to make one thing clear, on the other note, these changes, were inevitable, absolutely inevitable and essential. Because if you look at the online poker economy, it has been shaped very differently than it was 10 years ago. It's not the same as it once was. So changes were going to happen. And if you think about, the other issue is if there was an alternative to Pokerstars really for people to play, that was doing something on the same level in terms of player appreciation, VIP points and stuff, and being sustainable, we'd hear about them. But there isn't. Party for 888, a lot of these other companies, they're not able to sustain their company or business by giving the same kind of rewards that we're on. Personally, I saw the writing on the wall many years ago. I saw what was happening to the games with what happens is the amount of money that's being deposited each year is smaller than the amount of money that's being rewarded to Supernova elites, right? That's not sustainable long term, right? Obviously, there's money in the middle, right, that goes to keeping the thing churning. But something had to be done. My issue is just honoring a promise, right? And that's the thing. Listen, if they said 2017 January 1, we're discontinuing the VIP program entirely, right? I feel okay, you don't have to like it. You might think that's not fair. The games are unbeatable. Sure. And, you can make that argument, but it's honest and it's fair in the sense that if you don't like it, okay, you don't have to play. This is different because I feel people work towards something based on a promise and they're not being rewarded as we said we would reward them. And that's a problem, I think.
So I guess talking, with the people on that side of things, what are they saying about the Supernova elite, taking that away from all the players? That's a betrayal to people, that have achieved Supernova elite, the hardest workers on the site, the guys that are putting in the most volume, spending the most time on the site.
No, I hear you. Now, the most frustrating thing for me in all of this is, again, coming back to communication about what we've communicated to people. And it's been, okay, cuts. And then, there's been words to, this will help recreational players. But none of the information we've actually put out yet is aligned with that. Because all we've shown is that, you're getting cuts across the board, except for, I think it's Chrome that gets a very, very small increase, which is basically negligible. But I know of stuff that's coming in 2016 and beyond. I know of some ideas that they're implementing and some stuff that people are actually going to freaking love. And they really will benefit, the bigger picture, if you will. The problem is we can't tell our customers continuously, well, we're just going to make cuts and, we're going to spread the money. Where? We want to see some transparency. Issue with that, of course, is promotions need to be finalized. They're always time sensitive in terms of how much information you can give. So puts players like myself and, there's a lot of talk about others not speaking out, that are members of Team Pro. And you have to understand where they're at, right? They have a contract to represent the company. So they're not really in a position to be able to speak. I speak because I'm just me. I don't care. I'm just going to speak. They haven't said I can or can't speak. They have not commented on that at all. But in terms of their, silence for now, I think they're playing the wait and see approach as well to see what ends up happening of any of this.
Interesting. I think my friend Andreas posted when I said I was going to have you on the podcast a couple hours ago. He mentioned something about, when the announcements got changed, you tweeted out some things, you might have to take a stand, towards your beliefs. And one of his questions was, if they don't go back on some of these changes, if they decide to stick with this, does that put you in a position where you decide something like Vicky Corin did a while ago, where she actually left Pokerstars because she wasn't in agreement with the direction that the company was going?
Well, obviously in the last month, like every potential option as far as like what I can do to help the situation has been on the table for me. That includes everything. And then ultimately, you know, and I've talked to a lot of people about it. I thought about Pokerstars is still the biggest, you know, the biggest and best online poker site that exists. And so from the player's perspective, would they be better off if I was no longer in the role that I was? Like, if that helped them, if let's say, for example, you know, me leaving would guarantee that we could get these changes delayed for a year, and you know, it could make that sort of like, if it could have that sort of impact, that would be like a much more reasonable solution or possibility. But when I really think about it, like from the player's perspective, obviously from my perspective, I am obviously a paid employee of PokerStars, so it benefits me to stay with the company. But aside from that, like I thought about it, and I'm being totally genuine when I say this, like, would they be worse off or better off if I was no longer with the company? And that's, you know, again, I don't know the answers to those questions, but those are definitely some questions that I'm in.
I mean, I guess from the, you know, from a communication with PokerStars perspective, you're essentially really the only person that's communicating with the players on social media, you know, even on things like this on Twitch. I don't feel like many other PokerStars pros that really have, you know, the behind the scenes ears in terms of ideas or what the, you know, like these sort of discussions. So I suppose if you did leave, that would probably put things in an even worse point or worse situation than it is right now.
For the players.
For the players, correct, yeah.
Right, and again, you know, so there's things that people have to understand too about the company and the changes that were made. When a company becomes public, there's one key number that matters all of a sudden that didn't matter before, and that's, you know, the stock price, right? And if you've noticed that, you know, in the last, I don't know, little while, it's been going the wrong way, right? So there are shareholders now. It's not like it was in the past before when it was a private company where decisions could be made based on, you know, what the top guy thought. This is something that like he has to think about more than just you know, the players themselves, but the actual stock price. So again, that's something that creates sort of a different environment in terms of what a company needs to look for, right? A company takeover, they have to look to make some cuts so that they can increase profit. Like nobody buys a company and thinks like, let's just keep it status quo. They always look to grow it, right? The danger is, do these changes or do these types of moves alienate the people that were loyal to you for the 10 years that they were with the company, and then create a contraction of the number of players rather than expansion? Now, I think that, and I know, and I wish, again, this is the frustrating part, I know of things, and I can't talk about that are coming in 2016 that people would be excited about, that I believe will work. Like I believe regardless of what happens, you know, in 2016, there will be more new players on PokerStars than there was in 2015. And there will be more than there was in 2014. Like I genuinely believe that based on some of the ways in which marketing and promotional dollars will be spent. How does that benefit the guys who are, you know, basically getting screwed as Supernova Elite right now? Doesn't, right? In terms of like long-term health of online poker, like that is a consideration. Like, because again, what's been happening, if we just continue the status quo, let's say there was no changes ever, 3 years from now, if you didn't have any recreational players left, the ones who are trying to break even to, you know, just make money off Supernova Elite will have an even more difficult time trying to break even. And there just won't be enough liquidity left for anyone but like the absolute best players to ever win.
So if that's the argument, you know, wouldn't the recreational players last longer if they lowered the rake at these stakes that are unbeatable for the most part for the micro stakes players? At the micro small stakes cash, the micro stakes cash, you know, spin and goes, the rake there is super high. So if your idea is you want to keep the recreational players in business longer or playing longer, I mean, that seems like a pretty obvious potential, you know, solution as well.
That's one possibility, right? But then you're talking about, okay, so reducing revenue there. The other, well, so clearly what we're looking to do, one of the other ways is we're trying to increase profit, right? Not reduce like profit. So if you're going to make a cut, you know, the Supernova, let me explain this properly because I'm a little confused on how my words are coming out of my mouth right now. By lowering the rake at the micros, right? Those players may stay longer, but that would also decrease the revenue that they need to keep Supernova Elite's budget up. So for example, let's just take these numbers. If you pull in $240 million in deposits in a year, and Supernova Elites pull out 254, right? You have to pay for that somewhere. Like, you know, so lowering the rake at the micro stakes, it probably makes those games a little better and those players like last a little bit longer. But from, you know, from where the company sits and all the other new factors that matter now in terms of like increasing both volume and, you know, revenue, you know, like I don't know exactly how that would work, but it's not typically a practice that a lot of other companies are into. Like, let's lower the rake in spots. You know, that hasn't been happening in the last 10 years. We haven't seen sites go, you know, lowering rake.
Well, as you said, the other sites are terrible. So
yeah, right.
You can't necessarily compare yourself to the other sites. The other sites are they're terrible. So I mean, I think it's like
sure, but if somebody could do this right with a lower rake and, you know, do this responsibly and actually spend all the money they do on marketing and continue to build the site, then why isn't it being done? You know, like we've had a lot of years where we've seen how online poker works. If that would work in terms of like really creating an ecosystem that thrived even more so than now, it's never been done. It's never been attempted. And I think part of the reason is because no company would be willing to put in the kind of resources to create something like that with without it being like, you know, very, very profitable. Does that make sense?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, sorry. What I said doesn't make sense?
You know, I feel like there's just like you know, I definitely understand where you're coming from. You know, like, you know, you're involved with the poker world at a pretty high degree, but just in terms of like the specifics of the online world, I guess it's just like, it's really hard to really understand it completely unless you're in it. Like, it's really hard to understand how lowering the rake at the micro stakes and letting these players actually win makes them redeposit more. Like, if they just play once or twice and they lose because their rake's so high at something low goes and they never come again. Well, now if they start winning a couple times, that's going to make them want to keep coming back, deposit more. So that's like, you know, makes them want to go higher. Maybe makes them want to deposit more money. There's a better chance to actually make something of yourself in poker from that, you know, from that situation. Like, it's like, but that's what I mean. So like, you have the business guys that are behind the scenes that just look at it like, all right, you know, if we rake the rake lower here, well, we're not going to make as much money from the rake. So it's like, you look at it at a level one point of view instead of looking at it like, all right, well, what happens at that point in time? You know, how can we benefit from that? So I think that's where the big disconnect is with the business people and with the actual specific poker people.
So here's the thing. I think the key reason why the rake seems off kilter now as opposed to 10 years ago, because the rake didn't really change much at the micros over the last, you know, 10, 15 years. But people were making a lot more money back then because people were just worse, right? There was just more rec players and the average player sucked pretty much. So, you know, if you're playing 25 cent, 50 cent back then, the rake structure that was in place wasn't an issue for most people. Like, it wasn't something that came up as like, this is a problem. It became one now because the games are too tough, right? So the thing from a company's perspective, it's like, you can't guarantee a game's going to be good, you know? So like, for example, any rake at some point could become too big to beat, right? So if you say, let's say 100, 200, no limit hold'em, if everybody was playing like GTO optimal, right? Where everybody's win rate was like infinitesimal, right? Like, lowering the rake would be one thing to potentially like, you know, make some of it beatable or whatever, but I don't know that like any site could guarantee that whatever rake structure they put out, the game's going to be beatable. Do you get what I mean?
I think that goes back to your first. So one of the very first things you told me was that you think poker sites need to evolve. You think how it's sustainable, how it's right now is not sustainable. Well, as you said in the past, like, yeah, more people were winning because the players weren't as good, but now players are getting better. Now the poker sites need to evolve. As you said earlier, like, they need to change whatever it's doing now. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work long term. So that's not, you can't say like, oh, that's not an option. Like, we can't do that.
No, I didn't say it's not an option, but the question is like, how does that, so from one perspective, you talk about retention, like they'll last longer, and I get that, and I acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. But in terms of like revenue to spend on marketing and pull more money in, if we reduce the amount that comes in, it's become slightly more difficult to bring new players in, because a lot of the initiatives that, you know, they have they're planning for 2000, they're going to be very, very expensive. They're going to cost a boatload of money to ensure. So if you were to make some of these adjustments, it may cause some of those promotions to be stalled or not happen at all. And that's, I think, from their perspective, the issue with delaying the changes, because they believe that the changes are the right thing to do. And I'm not going to argue that, because that's a sidebar argument that I'm not even standing against, if you will. my issue, of course, is the broken promise and acknowledging first and foremost that that's what it is, rather than make the claim that we've adequately communicated this and given people fair warning, because I don't believe that part's true.
Yeah, I think you sort of understand, and that like the problem with, with the player side, sure, it's definitely some of the specific things that's happening, but a big part is the communication. I think we were talking about earlier on the podcast with Jason Moe, we were talking about how the changes, they got accidentally leaked on the Russian version of the site.
Yeah.
So, was PokerStars planning to release those changes the next day? I can't imagine. So no. So when were they actually planning to announce the changes? How were they, like, when was that going to happen?
From what I heard, and again, there's no proof or evidence that, can support this other than what I heard, it was about a week after that a week after the Russian leak, the plans were to release it then. And apparently they hadn't ironed out the exact details on what the changes would be until, because otherwise, so the thing that's been communicated to me is if they knew what the changes were, January 1, they would have released them, but they were unsure because the company was only run by Amaya for 3 to 4 months at the time. So they weren't sure exactly what they would look like. So the language was so vague and, like, to my satisfaction, not at all clear enough. Like, I honestly think that if it was messaged that it said, instead of PokerStars considering substantial changes to 2016, if it said if PokerStars will be implementing substantial cuts to the VIP program in 2016, that makes it closer, right? Because it's a little more clear. But the vagueness of what they did write doesn't satisfy me as far as, like, what do you call it? Atoning them for, a broken promise, or absolving them essentially of a broken promise.
I mean, how could it satisfy anybody? They announced they sent an email. This is Darmus. They sent an email in October 2014 saying there might be some changes. Like, that's it. Why didn't they? Maybe they could have said February this year. Maybe they're like, hey, we're thinking about cutting the SNE. Like,
yeah. That's been what I'm most furious about, because, now, see, a lot of things haven't been communicated well at all, because there was talk about implementing them last year, January 1, 2016. So that was a possibility that this year would have happened, but they delayed it. They delayed it a full year, right? So they feel as though they've given the players something. They've also, made the SNE 45% rather than 30%, but it's not communicated to people. So people didn't know. Had you told people, listen, we were thinking about implementing this, just do this in January, say, we were planning on doing this year, but it's going to happen next year, right? Then I think, and also very importantly, from a communication perspective, make sure the website doesn't say, if you do X in 2015, you will get Y in 2016. So massive communication breakdown, massively embarrassing. Like, probably, I mean, that's probably the most fitting word, is like, I've been with the company for a very long time, and I believe that they've always been the biggest and the best, and they've always done things the right way. But our communication to the players has been nothing short of junior high. I mean, it's been, it hasn't been communicated well. And this is even before these changes. Some of the other ones, obviously, when, they first rolled them out, about a couple of the adjustments they were making to some things here and there. I'm not happy with the communication at all. And I'm still not happy with the fact that we've given people all this negative information. Like, this is bad, 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 but we haven't backed it up with, here's why it's good, because you're going to get this. So, and I can't release that information. That's something that, like I said, there's some things I can talk about and some things I can't. But that stuff, that excites me. Like, some of the stuff they're doing, what doesn't excite me is reneging on a promise. It's not something I take lightly, and I obviously don't like it. And I'm sure that, if you talk to the team pros or anyone else, they're not going to all of a sudden say, oh yeah, no, I think it's fine. Every poker player, most people in business realize that this isn't something that is going to be taken well. And I don't think the communication's been good at all.
Guys, we're getting a lot of good comments on Twitch and on YouTube. I appreciate the comments and questions. There are a lot of long ones in here, so I'm trying to pay attention to the conversation. But if I see some good ones, I will pull them off.
Fire away.
And I got a lot of things written down here. I do, like I said, I do appreciate you coming on here and at least having some sort of back and forth or discussion about what's happening, because I think that's just what people want to hear. They want to hear something. And, some of the things you might say, then they might want to hear more. So it's sort of like, sometimes from your perspective, it's I'm going to be happy about something. So
yeah, no, the bottom line is this: like, I don't like the idea of not speaking about this kind of stuff. I think we're better off like having open and honest dialogue and like really hearing from the players. And I've done that. Like, I've talked to pretty much everybody that you know, even though I have not been an active online player as much as some of the other people, I've had, you know, good conversations with a wide variety of them to really educate myself and stuff that, you know, maybe I didn't know. I've obviously talked to Donnie privately, you know, several times about what he's doing, you know, going forward with the strike, and I believe it's tomorrow. So I'm like, in the last month, would say I've learned a lot more than I did, but from a business side, there's a lot of understanding that I already had, because I knew that these types of changes were going to happen. And I don't think, in fairness, right, I don't think anyone saw in 2014 when Pokerstars says we're considering changes, everyone was like, yes, we're gonna get more rake back. Like, I don't think anyone like legitimately thought that. Having said that, we don't put it on the customer to have to like decipher what we mean by that. It should be clear, concise, or clear and direct and honest. And I don't believe that we were clear with the messaging at all.
So from your communication with Pokerstars, do they plan in the future to be more, you know, communicate with the players? Do they plan to have some sort of back and forth? Are they going to be better than it is now, or is this sort of what we can expect in the future?
Well, this is, again, one of the biggest things I've been talking to them about is like the communication breakdowns. And I wouldn't say been given the opportunity, but I have the opportunity to help make sure that in the future, when anything that's controversial or something that comes out, that like I play a larger role in how it gets communicated. Because if I had, you know, and I'm going to take responsibility, like actually I'm, you know, full responsibility for not playing a bigger role in knowing some of this stuff before it was released. Because I know that I could have made a difference before, you know, if I knew in October 2014, I didn't even know that thing got released, to be honest with you. If I'd known, I could have maybe helped and said, like, what does this mean? Like, let's just tell the people what it means. Aside from that, just, I wish that there was like more I could do. You really, like, because here, ultimately, like, I don't make the decisions. I've been with PokerStars since 2006, right? I don't like every decision they've always made. Some of them I like, some I don't. But typically, most of them, I'm like, okay, well, I disagree, but I don't make the final decisions. It's not a big enough issue for me to say, like, you know, boycott. This issue, for me, is not about, like, really a decision or direction. Because, again, I'm fine with the direction. I like the direction they're going in. What really is ripping me inside is the broken promise that doesn't sit well with me. But again, like, I could argue for the changes being good for the ecosystem going forward. I don't know if there's a lot of value in that, because really it doesn't absolve us of the lack of communication and broken promise.
So do you think you can your voice really has an impact on the changes Pokerstars might do?
Well, I hope so. You know, I've had some good calls, and I've had some calls that, you know, were not quite as good. And that's why it's taken longer than I would have expected. You know, November 15th was when I said I had a target date for a blog, but then new things came up and more discussions and more discussions. I'm waiting to hear back about the latest proposal Wednesday, Thursday-ish this week. So as much as people are ragging on me for not writing the blog, like, I'm not going to write a half-ass blog that says, hey guys, you know, can't really tell you anything, but here's the blog. I want to make sure that, like, basically, I'll put it this way, I have like two written in my mind, right? Mm-hmm. One is a good one, like a really good one. The other one's not so good. Well, I'd say three. Okay, let's go three. One is like super good, which I don't know how optimistic I am at this point about that one happening. The other one is like, okay, reasonably good. The third one is just like basically an apology, if anything, from me, because I was unable to be effective. But I really hope that something comes of this, whatever that looks like. And I'm trying to think of like, what is a win? For me, that's changed as well. You know, at this point, like, I just want to be as effective as possible to create some change, to affect some sort of like difference, rather than, because if I don't, there's nobody else really fighting for that at this point. And I know that, you know, the players are organizing, and I support players, you know, right to do anything they want in terms of like organizing and fighting for their rights, or making any sort of demonstrations about anything, whether it's poker or not, like the strike. Unfortunately, like, when I'm looking at bigger picture, do I think it'll have an effect one way or the other? No. Like, I don't know that I mean, and again, now this is not for me saying that people shouldn't do it at all. Like, you do whatever compels you, whatever you think is right. You know, and if you want to make a demonstration with your dollars, you have every right to do so. Do I believe it will affect change positively or negatively in terms of like the revisions? I don't. But that's not to say that I'm opposed to it or for it. You know, again, I just don't
think the player strike will have absolutely no impact on things.
I think so. If anything, if I'm being completely honest here, I think it has the potential to have a negative effect. But I don't know that it has much potential to have a positive effect in terms of, because let's say, for example, look at it this way, right? Imagine they do go 3 days and like numbers are up, right? But and Don, I watched your podcast with him. He says like, we're basically drawing dead anyway, so you might as well give it a shot. And I don't disagree with him. But you'd expect numbers to be off, right? And numbers to like be down because we're missing, what is it, like 2,000 players now? You would expect it to be down. Yeah. But if they're not, right? If they're not down, people then they might be like, well, we'd be okay. And if they are down, that's already kind of expected. So the question is like, how effective can it be long term? How much is that going to, and based on my discussions and that I've had so far, I don't know that it will. And again, like I said, I support everyone's right to like, to show their, to protest or do whatever they choose to do based on what drives them. So that's not me poo-pooing it at all. I hope you understand that. Like,
I don't know. It kind of sounds like that.
No, really, it isn't. Like I actually,
the day before the strike, it does kind of. I'm sure it's going to sound that way to a lot of people out there. Of course,
I'm telling the truth. Like honest Ed here. I'm telling the absolute truth, right? I don't think that people are. I know it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen for the next 3 days or whatever, and it's going to happen. And I like I said, I hope that nobody changed their mind on it because of what I said. Because if you did, you should rechange your mind and do what you're compelled to do because what you think is right. You're not going to be the one because you strike that destroys this deal. Okay. So again, like I said, I think the effect would be minimal. Basically, not much either way. So don't like I want to retake that back then and say like, if you were planning on doing it, by all means, don't let me change your mind.
Yeah, I think more of the goal. I think a lot of the people that are going on strike, sort of realize nothing might come from it this time, but just being able to organize together potentially in the future might lead to something. There's been talks of something at EPTs being done. There's been talk of something at PCA potentially being done. So it's sort of like a step one to potentially something down the road that may be able to have an impact. And like as Donnie said, is there a worst case scenario that could happen out of here? Could it get any worse for the players?
I agree 100,000%. So as a step, this is something that like shows the power of players potentially getting together to do something in the future. What I should have specified is this specific one, right, for the 3 days. And I think Donnie acknowledges too. It's like, it's unlikely to have a major effect on this one. But what it will do, again, like you said, is show a solidarity of a group of players, a block of players that gives them a voice, but a voice that's going to be bigger than my voice alone, right? Mm-hmm. So again, like, I mean, I talk to Donnie all the time about this. I've never once said to him or like, recommended that this was not a good idea or that he shouldn't do this. I don't see how I could ever stand in that place. Like if it's something that down the road is the start of the players really owning their voice, how would I ever not support something like that?
We're getting some interesting comments out there, guys. A lot of people are saying, get Donnie on for a three-way here. I like. We want to hear Donnie rebuttal these comments on the podcast. I admit that'd be fun.
I don't think you would rebut. I mean, I don't know that we're disagreeing on it.
I think they want like a spirited debate back and forth. They want Donnie to state the case, and then they want mixing it up. But I feel like go ahead.
The problem is people are not realizing is like in order to have a debate, you have to have people that are like on a different side of things,
and
right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
If we're aligned on our vision in terms of what we'd like to see happen, I don't know how much of a debate it would be if we just go, yeah, I agree.
No, that's what I mean. I feel like you're on the player side. There's just really not much that, you can do what you can do, but ultimately it might not be able to change anything as it is right now.
Certainly, like, listen, ultimately, like I can only do the best I can, right? I mean, that's like as the strike, the people who are striking, Donnie, the whole group, we can just do the best I can to like raise the issue consistently. And I feel like, I'm not going to delve into how many hours I put into this, both speaking to them and speaking to players about this issue, but it's been significant. And I mean, I'm doing my best. Like I really am, I'm really just doing my best. Again, I don't know. I can't make any promises because I don't make the decisions. If I could make the decisions, first of all, y'all wouldn't have had VIP rewards from years ago. I promise you. You know what I would do? If I was going to run a website, right? This is how I would structure my promotional bonuses. Depositing players would get bonuses, okay, consistently. So I would use a trickle up system. People who deposit money on the site, maybe, you know, regularly and continuously, whatever, they get free rolls, they get bonuses. If they get, you know, if they play up to a certain deposit bonuses. What happens then is those guys who are playing longer end up losing to the pros anyway. So the pros get the money anyway. What I never would have set up is a situation where professional players are taking money out of the system because they're winning and they're good, which is not a problem, but also giving them bonuses. And I used to run games, and the example I would use is when I was a teenager, I used to run games, and there was this one guy named Moshe in the game. There'd be a bunch of pros, and this guy Moshe, who was the worst player ever, literally, right? Now, if Moshe quit, the games didn't go, right? So who mattered most in my game? Moshe did, right? Moshe, he went from the club that we were playing in, he started his own club, and he had friends that were worse than him, right? So everybody went over there. Go ahead, you can interrupt.
If you're only like, sure, if your only fucking like outlook is I want to make as much money as I can from this, I understand that. But you know, you're supposed to be poker stars in this situation. So don't you want like a quality ecosystem of high stakes players, people to like, you sort of want all these things. Like,
so I believe it would work, right? I believe it would work. You could be like, so say the amount of money that's been given out. Let's say it's 254, right, for the VIP program. If that 254 was still divvied up, but instead of, you know, the vast majority of it going to the high volume players, it was leveled out more, where like, you know, the bottom end players, they would last longer, right? I think it would just create a healthier ecosystem. I'm not saying that, you know, pros or like volume grinders wouldn't also get benefits. There's things that I would put in place for like high volume players too, but I would definitely stress a lot more like these guys who deposit, you know, $20, $30 a month, you know, giving them an extra 20, like giving them an extra 30 to just keep churning them in and keep like, you know, keep them invigorated by giving them deposit bonuses and stuff like that. So that would be where I would spend a lot of my focus. I wouldn't totally abandon giving high volume players benefits, right? Because obviously you rake a ton off of those types of players. But what I'm saying is I would shift it massively so that the money goes to the bottom end and then trickles up, because I believe that's what it would do.
All right, let's talk about, because I mean, I don't know. Is in the 2016 plans. I don't think they're gonna. That's a great idea. I think it'd be good if they gave these new players these deposit bonuses or these free rolls. I mean, that I don't think it's gonna happen, unfortunately. But you know, while we're on that topic, a lot of people are talking about they're taking away rake back from the high stakes. They're essentially raising the rake at 5-10 and above for cash games. Now, this seems to be doesn't make much like, so they're just taking away rake back completely. It seems like they're trying to eliminate high stakes. It's trying to make those games run less. And I know we're going to get to the argument of if a fun player's in the games are going to run. Like, but there's still a lot of games that do run with regulars playing each other. I mean, I know that's what it goes back to, but like now there's just going to be there are still some games that still do run without, you know, a complete fun player in the game. And now I feel like those are going to all go away. And I think a lot of other players that are playing those games feel like that's going to go away too. And high stakes in a way is going to become eliminated.
So I'm not logistically, logically, just stripping people that play 5, 10 and higher and people that play mixed games of any bonuses. Like I can make any logical sense of it, like at all. Like there's nothing that I can think of, because for many years, like, those were our most valued customers in a sense. You know, the Isildurs and Tom Dwans and Phil Ivies and Axtons battling it out the high stakes created a buzz that lower limit players wanted to aspire to become, right? So essentially by totally stripping them of all VPPs because we feel like they don't necessarily want them or need them is not true, clearly. And I agree with you in the sense that it would create less reg on reg action because there's a lot less incentive to even play. And it just doesn't make sense for me. But having said that, right, like I don't get how this is okay. Like legally or logistically, no games are ever like guaranteed. So let's say you're a hyper sit and go player, right? And that's how you make your living. There's no guarantee that that'll exist in 2016, right? If you play Omaha, they might just decide not to have Omaha. They may just decide to create new variants like spin and go or other things like that. So there's no like promise being broken there, right? What I look at it as, I just think it's like more of like, I would call it like a slap in the face to some of our most valued customers, but it's different in the sense that it's not a broken promise, because there was no promise that, you know, VPPs would be awarded, you know, for each and every game the same way for each year, like for eternity, right? Again, I think that one, slap in the face, the other one, broken promise.
Interesting. But do you think they're trying to, I mean, from your perspective, do you think they're trying to take away these high stakes games? Donnie points out in the chat that virtually every high stakes regular amateur is a supernova or higher. Taking away 5-10 rake back is literally 30 to 100K out of their pockets per year.
I've explained that quite clearly. Like, I think there was a misconception or a misunderstanding from them in terms of how valuable that was to the high limit players. And I explained to them that, and I don't know that my numbers were accurate, but I said something to the effect of 15 to 25% of a lot of players' win rate comes from the VPP program. I think their goal in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, they may not understand that this route doesn't accomplish it, right? So, for example, though the issue of a table being full because there's a bad player in it with a 40-player waiting list, and then as soon as he leaves, the game breaks. Will these changes help that? No. Everyone who understands how poker works knows that this will make it worse, because we won't have as many games running with regs on regs. You're basically going to be exclusively bum hunting, right? Like, no one's ever going to play anyone else who's a professional player, because it's like you're not getting the added value, and it's already hard enough to win, as Donnie's pointed out several times on your show. So I think that the goal they have in mind for some of the changes doesn't line up with the way poker works, and I don't know that any poker player would disagree with that.
Okay. So I guess I don't know if you understood. Are they trying to take away high stakes? Is that basically it? No, they're not trying to take away the high stakes.
No, I don't think that's the case. Nothing I've heard is like we want to eliminate high stakes poker. I think what they want to do, and again, like I said, I don't know that they're taking the best approach at this, is they want to protect suckers, right, from getting targeted. Okay, because that's essentially what's been happening, right?
They think this is going to protect suckers from getting targeted.
So remember how I said that the goal isn't aligned with the approach, right? So we're agreeing. As I said, every poker player would agree with that. But the goal is to protect these, players who basically are lambs to the slaughter. And I tried to explain that no matter what system you set up, poker's tougher now than it was 10 years ago, right? A guy who's just walks in off the street is just going to get crushed no matter what. No matter what changes we make. That's just the scenario. It's not the supernova elite players necessarily that are, the cause of that. It's just the fact that everyone's better. So again, this comes down to a different understanding of how poker works, really, and how their goal of protecting the wide majority of players and the approach they're taking, I don't think is the right approach.
Yeah, I don't think this protects the recreational players at all. It's only going to make things worse, because now players are playing, they're going to be bum hunting harder. They're going to be looking for that edge even more. So when these, it's just going to make it, and
If the edge is already this small, right? And like playing, with the VPPs, your edge is going to be way non-existent. So the only time it would make sense to play is if you have what's known as a drooler in the game, right? Like, it would just be silly, really. If you're trying to make money playing poker, which is what we've always set up as a company, as far as what we do is you have the opportunity to be a professional, you can move up to the high stakes. If that holds true at all, then the VPP, the VIP point structure plays a big role in that. Again, now notice I said that I would have changed this many, many years ago. And that's not to say that I would wipe out high stakes poker or not acknowledge or honor what they add to the games. I would simply make sure that recreational players will, in terms of retention, were much better taken care of than they have been the last 10 years. I think the focus shifted too far in one direction, and that sort of created kind of a problem today. I think we oversold it. Let's be honest. I think that for many, many years, the amount of money that was going out to supernova elites it's a lot of freaking money, a ton of money. It's coming out, and the deposits are not matching the money that's coming out, right? So something had to be done. I just don't like the way that it's being implemented so quickly.
Interesting. We're getting a lot of comments out there, guys. Appreciate some of the comments, man. I think people want me to sort of fire away at some of the things that you're saying, but I don't know. I don't know if
you can say whatever you like. Honestly, I'm not here to for you to sugarcoat anything. If you have something that you want to, address, then feel free. It's not going to make me think any less of you,
No,
anything.
I know what you mean, man. It's just it sounds like the disconnect sounds bigger than I actually thought initially. It sounds like the people that are making the decisions are sort of clueless about how poker works at all, and like how the high stakes play a factor into the dream a lot of poker players have. Like, we go back down to the guys who deposit. Why are they depositing? They want to be high stakes players one day. They see people having success, able to reach the high stakes, a lot of games running. So now we're trying to eliminate that thing. You got the rake high down there, they can't get up there. Well, not like, why would they want to keep depositing if they can't get up here? So it's like they're pushing towards spin and goes, they're pushing towards, like, it seems like it just wants to be spin and go stars. And like, I mean, if you're involved in the poker world, like, you understand that, like, but if you're not involved in poker, obviously, if you're just from the outside, if you come in and you're like, all right, let's take a look at, let's look at these numbers here. Okay. Like, all right, cut it away there, sort of thing. Well, obviously in that situation, you're not going to fucking understand what's happening, sort of thing. So, I'm a little,
so I can say, like, the alternative, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, not saying that this is necessarily the way I view it, but just so you have that. The idea is, if you could bring in, with a new structure of promotional ideas, like 100 million new players, let's make a ridiculous amount of players, right? Something stupid. Those micro stakes games, if you brought in those new players, with the current rake structure that they have now, would likely be very lucrative, as would games across the board, if this were possible. And I'm not saying that it is. So I think the theory from those people is that we can bring in so many new players with these new ideas that they have going forward that would benefit everybody in the long run, and would make games much more fun and lucrative, because the percentage of players would be much more balanced again towards, like, because now I remember I played 1-2 no limit on stars, like, I don't know, a few months ago, just practicing four tabling, and I was playing like at 1-2, all regs and like maybe one guy that wasn't, and I was kind of surprised by that, again, because I've obviously been out of touch with it. But changing the dynamic of what those tables look like in terms of an increase in recreational players, if that were possible, and if this took it in a direction where we just had this influx of like players, that new players, then the argument there would be that, people's win rates that are good players could be equally high, if not higher. Again, I'm not saying that I can prove that, or that there's evidence that I can back that up with. It's just a theory at this point.
I guess another big thing is the FPP conversion. So they're converting all dormant FPPs that are in accounts automatically on December 1st. They're turning them into the gold stars. Well, when's that? It's December. It's the end of the year, right? January 1st.
January 1st. Okay, you said December 1st. That's tomorrow.
Sorry, yeah, January 1st. So they're going to convert FPPs that aren't already converted at the lowest rate, I believe, to the coin, whatever they're called, the coins, the simplified system that they have. Now, it sounds like that's sort of a money grab. There's not a lot of people. There's a lot of people who aren't going to be able to access their FPPs. Maybe there's accounts that they just haven't played in a couple of months. They don't realize that this is going to happen, and a lot of people are going to end up losing a lot of value in their lost FPPs. So
correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be, but I read something recently that I think I just read it yesterday or today actually. That at the Supernova Elite, the transferring to star coins, there's like a 25% decrease in the value of them. But outside of that, like lower than that level, there isn't, like, at all, I think, or I'm not sure about this. And again, you correct me if I'm wrong. So I think the thinking is that if you're a Supernova Elite and you have whatever it is, 6 weeks or 2 months to make the transfer, you can do so. If it were me, I would make it 6 months to a year, right? But I don't have a problem with them like changing the value, as long as they let people get full value for them beforehand. So if you can still get the full value up until January 1st, I get why people would not love that part. But of all the things that are going on, right? Of all the things that are going on, that's like bottom of the barrel in terms of like concerns for me at this point. Because like, as much as it is, not the ideal way, like you should give people more time, they still are giving people time to cash them out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
I want to check on that too.
I think it's bad for almost all players in terms of conversion.
Okay, because someone wrote something, and I'll double check on that, because I thought that it was basically the same thing unless you were Supernova Elite, where you basically were getting 20% less, 5% less. And if that's wrong, I'll retract that. I'm not saying that I know that for sure. I thought I read that today.
I'm pretty sure it's Platinum Stars, Supernovas, and Supernova Elites.
Someone posted a graph. Okay.
So that's not very much on it's something you're concerned about, really, for the most part. You're more concerned about.
Sure. If you look at the gravity of the other things, like, you have to pick your battles, right, to some degree. Mm-hmm. And I'm not crazy enough to think that all the changes can be reversed, because I know that they're going to do some of this stuff. Like, it's not reasonable. So if I'm going to fight, right, for something, that's not top of the food chain in terms of like my concerns. I mean, is that fair? Like, I mean, there's other bigger things that I think are like bigger travesties than that one. Although again, that one, I would not handle it the same way. I would give more time. I would have announced it. If like, for example, if you think it would have been fine if they announced it in July and implement it January 1st. If you give people like, what is the right amount of time? They believe it's, 2 months. I believe if it's more, but that's not something that like, I think is, I mean, that's arguable. I guess at the very least, that's debatable and arguable. It's not as clear cut as some of the other things are.
I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people in the chat are saying that it sounds like you really don't understand that what some of the changes are and exactly what type of impact they'll have on the players. And it seems like, it does seem like you're really disconnected in terms of, the specifics of online and what's really happening. And
okay, how so?
I mean, just the high stakes in general, like, the idea of the dreams for players, it's starting at the bottom. Like it's just hard to really understand everything completely. I wish I have this specific series. This is where I need Donnie Stern. He's more of like the GTO expert at actually getting into the specific things like that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just impossible to really completely understand how people are thinking or the intricacies of what's really happening in the online world, and from the player's perspective or the recreational player's perspective, if you're just really not in the scene and really, seeing what's happening on a day-to-day basis and, participating in the forums and, kind of reading all those different things. So it's just, I think it's just hard to really understand. Let me read it.
It's certainly a complex issue, but I mean, I would say that like overriding, one obvious truth is, this is obvious, I think, without even needing to play, is the games are tougher, right? Like I think we all agree that the games are tougher today than they were in 2004. So as a result, win rates come way down, right? So the win rate versus the rake, the ratio is going to become much, much smaller. So it becomes an issue at some point where, yeah, I get it. Like if a game becomes too tough, no matter what the game, it can become unbeatable. And then you lose the allure of a guy starting at the bottom and getting to the highest levels, which is something that is attractive and always was for guys who start out with like their first deposit.
Mm-hmm. People in the chat, I'm enjoying the live part of this. People in the chat want Donnie in the chat. What do you think, Daniel? Can we get Donnie in the chat? What do you think?
I can't see the chat, but you can fire away.
Can we get Donnie in the call right now?
Absolutely.
You sure it's okay? All right. Well,
yeah.
We'll give it, Donnie. If Donnie's out there, we'll give him. Let me know, buddy. I'm pretty sure Donnie, but he might have to put a t-shirt on or a tank top on or something like that. Or
I have one on underneath, by the way.
You have a t-shirt or a tank top? You have a tank top.
I thought you were gonna wear one, so I was gonna go tank top, but whatever.
Yeah, I had to be a little bit more professional for this one. So yeah. All right, Donnie said, give me 2 minutes. So I guess we're gonna get Donnie in the room here, and this ought to be some interesting stuff here.
Okay.
This ought to be some interesting stuff. So Donnie says 2 minutes. He's got to put a shirt on. He's currently wearing a black tank top, like he usually wears sitting around. So,
okay.
And then I guess, do you think there's any chance of any changes being overturned by the end of the year from your conversations with people at Stars?
Do I think there's a chance?
Do you think there's a good chance? What do you think the chance is?
I would not be like the big ones, the most important ones. I'm not optimistic about. Some, I was more optimistic maybe a week ago, less optimistic today. So I'm really like, before I can actually make a final judgment on what I think is possible, I have to wait till I have another call on Wednesday or Thursday and figure out where they're at with things and where that leaves the players. Because I thought we were making progress in a couple of those key areas. And one of the calls I had kind of reverted that progress, and that was like really frustrating. So we'll see what happens with the next one. But again, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm all that optimistic right now.
Eek, that's not good to hear. You seemed pretty optimistic a couple weeks ago when I chatted with you a little bit about it.
I was. Yeah. Like I said, I was. I thought that we were making some progress. And again, when I say progress, I'm not talking about like reversing all the changes. That was realized like that wasn't going to happen, right? So picking your battles. And there was a couple key areas that I thought that, we made some key progress on, and then they went in and looked at things and came back with something I wasn't exactly thrilled to hear.
Well, I really wish they could announce these good changes for 2016. All these ideas they have and the marketing plans that they have and the 100 million.
That would tell more of the story for sure. Again, I don't think it would absolve them of a broken promise, but if people saw some of the stuff they're doing, they could at least see that like there's some truth. Again, if it all plays out the way it's supposed to the idea that the recreational players would benefit from this. But until that can be communicated, it's just hot air and words, right? Like it doesn't mean anything. If I say, "Oh, guys, good stuff's coming, I promise," like what does that mean? It's just not clear enough. It's just not valuable.
Yeah, it seems like this would be a perfect time while they have all this negative PR to come out with something positive, and at least Pokerstars is supposed to be coming back to the United States pretty soon here. That'll obviously be some good PR, but maybe
that would be good.
That'd be good. I'm pretty sure that'd be good.
I think we'll think like that. Yeah.
All right. Donnie says he's ready. I'm going to send him the link right now, guys. And I've only done one three-way.
Oh yeah, that's not what I heard.
On live stream before. And
I've done plenty more than one.
Allegedly, I've only done one three-way on live stream before, and they were in the same place. I've never actually done a three-way with two individual people here.
I never did a three-way on a live stream either.
You've never done a three-way before on a live stream?
On a live stream. It wasn't live stream.
Not a live stream. Okay.
I'll quit behind.
We're gonna let Donnie get in here and let's see what he's wearing. He's probably gonna be wearing a button. I'm sure. I think this is serious matters. So these comments are interesting. Brett Hanks, what's up, Brett? He says props to Daniel for at least having this conversation. I agree with that completely.
I wish it was on a different tone. Not that I wish I had more positive news. Unfortunately, it's been a struggle.
Donnie's in the house right now. Donnie, welcome to the live stream in the middle of it, my friend. How are you doing out there?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Okay, no tank top.
No tank top. This is serious business.
All right, Donnie. So obviously you've been listening to the podcast. You've heard things that Daniel said. Shout out to the chat. We got you in here. Go ahead. What, I'm sure you probably have some questions. You want something you want to ask? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say one thing. Daniel and I have been talking a lot, and I think when he says that we agree on a lot of things, I think he's misunderstanding that I agree with a lot of his approach to some of these things, and I agree with, in some sense, like Star's right to do certain things, not what they've done. But I don't agree with these changes in the way that they're going to help players that they say, and I don't agree that their intentions are genuine in the way that they've presented them. I've said certain things like, if they had made, let's say Stars had announced these Supernova Elite changes and they said it would happen in 2017, like I would be irate and I would be upset, but I wouldn't be approaching it with the same level of like outrage that this is like truly like something beyond any of the other changes that they've done, and not just that, but it's also the degree to like how extreme the changes are, like taking away VPPs completely for high stakes and combining that with taking away Supernova Elite. So, yeah, I agree with Daniel in that we can agree that Stars has a right to change their prices and move the line in some degree to where they feel that they can do okay for their company while still maintaining a sustainability to the games. But I don't agree that they're doing that, basically.
Okay, I want to respond to that too, because actually the key disconnect there is that, I mean, like I said, we both mostly agree. The one key disconnect in terms of like this benefiting recreational players, and again, I cannot share like what specifically, but like I do believe that what has been released, I agree with Donnie 100%. There's nothing about what's been released thus far that benefits anyone at all. They haven't released any information. If what I'm being told on the other side in terms of what's in store for 2016, and if that became public, I think that most would see those as beneficial to somebody in some way. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to release any of that information yet because it's not finalized or anything like that, and that's been the most frustrating thing for me. So if I was in your shoes or anyone else, all the information I had was what's been released, I would have the exact same opinion. I do have a little bit more information about some of the things that I think are good, really good, and that's what makes me see, like, if these changes create that, that would be okay. Again, we both agree, of course, that January 1, 2016 isn't the time to do that, but if they were implementing the changes plus the back-end stuff, January 1, 2017, I would be all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that point, and to me, it's also like, you know, I've heard you saying this, and it's my reaction is basically like, okay, you know, but like, what can I do with that really? Because
exactly,
you know,
I understand.
Yeah, and I know that you know that. But it's also about, you know, to this point, we can't basically expect stars to be acting in good faith. And what you're kind of hinting at is that, like, oh, but like there's going to be something good happening. Trust me. And you're not even saying trust me. You're saying I understand. You know, I know you're saying I understand why you're angry. But you know, if stars expects us to basically trust them that they're like making these changes and then following it up something later that'll make it all worthwhile, you know, they've done nothing to show us why we should trust them in that regard. You know, if this were stars of the stars of 2012, you know, when their PR was at an all-time high after buying, you know, full tilt and repaying player balances, and it was still owned by the Scheinbergs, you know, they would have a lot of ability to sort of say, wait, trust us, you know, but they basically have none now, and I don't, and because it's partial, and it's basically ever since the Amaya takeover, you know, basically like the last year.
So I've made that exact same argument, like the one that you just made. I've made that exact same argument to them, that the goodwill that we've had as a company for the last 10, 12 years and how we've been great to players or whatever, that doesn't, that's not grandfathered in, right? It's not like just because the company for many, many years did the right thing by players that we have that credibility and trust. So it has to be rebuilt or even, like, you know, sustained to a certain degree. And based on the ways in which things have been communicated, communication has been, for me, like the #1 biggest problem. Because again, if you were going to give people a picture of what 2016 looks like and you only give them the bad picture without any evidence, right? And again, you're right. There's no reason to say, well, oh, they said, you know, there's going to be good stuff. Good stuff is too vague. It doesn't really sell enough. If it was clear to people and transparent, this is going here, which it hasn't been, and I understand what you're saying is like there's no reason why we should trust that it is. That's again been my biggest frustration, is the fact that all we've been getting is bad news, and I've been pushing them to try and expedite some of the areas in which this would help people that would be based on promotions that they have planned. So if that were to happen, then I think that it would soften blows somewhat, not fully, of course. And again, then you would have to make good on that, because what we have now is a broken promise, and you can't continue to do that and expect players to have any trust or faith.
Yeah, something else, Donnie?
Well, yeah, I mean, so in that regard, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Anyone else?
Yeah, I hear it a little bit.
Might be my laptop.
Could you lower the volume just a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is yours, Daniel.
Yep.
I can't read the chat right now, but I'm sure everyone's accusing you of sabotaging this this conversation. No, but to go back to what you're saying. Okay, I think that's better now.
Well, I technically mute him for a second because the feedback's low on Danielson, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I got a little distracted. Yeah, so, and it's not just about like the good faith argument either, that we're like, I'm saying we can't expect stars to act in good faith anymore. I would say we can't expect stars to act with any degree of competence anymore, given that these changes were leaked. They couldn't even release the PR properly. I mean, if you look at the actual PR statement that they made along with it, it makes no sense. It's like literally it's like total nonsense. It's like they're reading, like they think their audience are a bunch of children, and so like the idea that like, oh well, something good is going to happen in the future. I understand what you're saying, that you have more information than we do, but from our perspective, it's just kind of meaningless, and I don't really know what. I mean, I don't know where we can go from here, but
No, like, you know, I think I was pretty clear in most of the way that I acknowledge that. But like everything I've said, it's like it's empty words when I can just say to you guys like, oh yeah, good stuff's coming. I realize that. I actually feel stupid even saying it. You know, I happen to know based on what I've been told that this is something that is planned. But again, I can't guarantee that it happens, of course, because you know it hasn't yet. So from that perspective, you know, everything you said I don't disagree with. Like, and I would be feeling exactly the same way. And I'm not asking people, really, I'm not asking people to say, you know, trust me, guys, things are going to be okay. I don't know how this is going to roll out. You know, I have another call scheduled this week, based, you know, with a proposal that I made that, you know, we'll see how that looks, and also mostly about being more transparent about what's really going to happen in 2016. I think that at the very least, the players should have the full picture of what this means. So cuts. Where's it going? You can't tell me. You can't tell the public, oh, this is going to help the poker economy and help it grow and help recreational players without any information or any evidence that will be true, just words. And like what I'm saying right now, which is just a bunch of words that don't have a lot of meaning. So I get the frustration. I get why everybody's pissed off. And, you know, I certainly don't blame them at all.
We have Adam on YouTube. He says something good. Yeah, it is on Daniel's end there, man. Daniel, do you have any headphones potentially?
You know what? Let me do. Let me just move. Okay, I'm gonna go to my little comfy spot, and maybe that'll help. Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay. It's just sometimes if you're on Wi-Fi, it might be a little bit of feedback from some people's end.
Oh, I'm on Wi-Fi. Hang on. Can't see here. It's been happening lately.
Whoa.
Might take a minute. It's still bad, right? Still bad, right?
Yeah, now it sounds like you're an alien coming to take over the world and conquer us right now. So
it's worse?
Your audio's worse now, yeah.
Let me move back to fucking...
Oh, now it sounds fine.
Now it sounds good.
Sounds good here?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, I'm just going to stand.
You got to stand up and hold that the entire time in front of your face.
Huh?
You got to stand up the whole time, I suppose, and...
Okay, I'll do it.
Well, just when he's talking.
Yeah, just when you're talking, yeah.
All right.
You have to put the headphones on to prevent the reverb, man. It's our first three-way, guys. You know, sometimes there's going to be some issues when you're doing it live. This is just sometimes it's the kind of things that happen. So, let me find this comment that Adam said here on YouTube. I can't find it. There's so many comments in here. Adam said, Donnie, try to explain to DNegs why the changes are bad. He doesn't really seem to get the extent of why it is so bad. It is far worse than screwing over a very small number of people who are supernova elite.
Okay, well, I'm happy to talk about specifically the taking away 5-10 plus rake back change. Why I think the specific things that I think that'll do to damage the games, and the specific things that I think it'll do that'll specifically make the experience worse for recreational players. Not even talking about the pros even. So first of all, if you're talking about the economy of high stakes, of let's say 5-10 plus, the changes where where the 5-10 plus is where the VPPs are going to be gone. This economy, in many ways, operates like separately from the rest of the poker economy. A lot of the recreational players at 5-10 and higher are big net depositors who come back time and time again and deposit a lot. Obviously, there's also guys who win a tournament and go play, and there's not a lot of people who it's their first time playing poker, right? Is what I'm getting at. It's not like people who see Neymar in a commercial and deposit $50, right? It's a different sort of amateur. A lot of them, first of all, because of what I'm saying, because they're more experienced, are going to be more aware of these changes and more aware of all of a sudden not reaching VPP milestones and things like that. Secondly, if you're a regular amateur, as in an amateur who plays with any degree of regularity, plays on weekends, plays whatever, it's a common hobby of yours, and you're playing 5-10 plus, you're going to be supernova almost certainly. You're going to get supernova status almost for sure. So taking away all of your rake back is right away going to be anywhere from, I think, maybe 15 to $75,000 a year just directly out of their pocket, and that's money that is going directly back into the poker economy. That's keeping amateur players still playing and playing more often and having a better experience because they're getting money back. So to those amateurs, it's purely a takeaway from them. Now, what also is going to happen is, let's just say it plainly, when you're taking away VPPs from high stakes, you're increasing the rake. That's all it is. Like, yes, it's in the form of rewards, and it has slightly different rewards based on volume, but fundamentally you're increasing the rake. And when you increase the rake, you're going to increase the standards that people require to play in a certain game, right? So essentially, you're promoting what people like to call bum hunting. You're basically if you define bum hunting as extreme game selection, you're basically making extreme game selection unavoidable, because where somebody might previously have started a game to try to get a game going and play in like a low edge game or a game they might not even have an edge in, now that becomes like not an option anymore, or at the very least it discourages it from becoming an option. So I think what you're going to end up seeing is games are not going to run as often, and the pros that are around at 5-10 plus are going to basically linger around, wait for a fish, and then pounce. Okay, there's going to be way less of like a gambling atmosphere amongst the high stakes pros. Which is exactly what I think.
I don't mean to interrupt you on that, but like everything you just said, I said already in this broadcast, and I agree. When it comes to I already said it's completely illogical to target the 5-10 and higher. I never actually. I mean, I was very, very clearly saying like makes no sense to me. It's a slap in the face to the high limit pros. Obviously, it's within their right to do because it wasn't a promise, but I totally understand how it just makes no sense to. And I said quite clearly that their goal, which is to protect the jeweler, if you will, that these changes would make it worse for them. So I fully understand that aspect of it. Yeah. So no, I mean, if you want to continue, you can. But
okay, no, I'm glad you interrupted me, so I didn't have to go any further. But in that case, like when you say you agree with the changes, so like what do you agree with?
So what I agree with is this, and again, the issue here is part of what I'm about to say is again in that area of like I'm talking about something that I can't fully disclose. I'm a fan of changing the way promotional dollars are rewarded to make sure that retention at the lowest levels and recreational players happens more regularly and more more rigorously. So right now what we created was a system where again, I'll use the rough numbers of you got 240 million deposited into the site of new deposits, and then 254 going out to supernova elites, right? I'd like to see more money, a lot more money going, promotional money, to the bottom end players. Still maintaining, of course, people that put in high volume, getting some sort of benefits, and actually just really having an advantage in some of these other promotions. I just think that like it was tipped, the scale was tipped too far in one direction for too long, and it created an environment where, like say, before they had rake distribution, where it was like the rake was distributed based on whether you played the hand or not. There was a time years ago, I know they've made adjustments to it, where essentially the style of play that you wanted to play to break even wasn't conducive to having like fun games, right? So we've obviously fixed that. We fixed that over time. But what I would really do, what I really would like to see changed is the amount of money. It's too much. Like it's a lot of money that comes out for those guys, and I would move that to make sure that these guys who are like low-end depositors are getting better benefits for just depositing money.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like this is my problem with the argument, is that like it's like the players are like arguing about something over here and you're arguing about something over here, and it's like we've discussed, because like you have access to this information and you are like having this dialogue with stars with privileged information that they have and we don't, and so in that sense we're not going to get anywhere discussing this, because like in order
we could if we get to the point where if that were true, right, like let's say if we played Fantasyland for a moment, if that were true, then we could say, okay, this is a good thing. If it's not true and it doesn't happen, then it's complete bullshit, and it's like detrimental to the entire ecosystem for pro players, recreational players, everybody. If it's just simply money being sucked out of the system and isn't going anywhere, then there's no defense against that being bad for the poker ecosystem. I would not be stupid enough to make one because it's just not true. unless those funds are distributed to other members of the poker community, then nothing I said matters, right? I mean, so yeah, I get what you're saying, that we can't have a discussion about that, but I think we can both acknowledge that if that were true, okay, seems good, and if not, then I agree with you completely. There's nothing good about it. It would destroy online poker.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the sense that Stars wants to enhance the experience for the new recreational player, for the new sign-up, and that they want to make that experience better, I'm totally in agreement that that's something that they should do. But, well, first of all, I don't know, like, the idea that, like, if you want to improve their experience, it has to come from somewhere when the company is making, I don't know how many $1 billion a year or 500 million a year in revenue or something like that. The idea that, like, it has to come from Supernova Elite benefits. Supernova Elite benefits, by the way, so last year there were 441 Supernova Elites, I think, and they're getting anywhere from 100 to 150,000, maybe more if they're putting in, like, many times more volume than just to get Supernova Elite. So in that sense, you're talking about 50 million, maybe 75 million or something, depending on how much. So the idea that, like, in order to fund this like redistribution, it has to come from the Supernova Elite players. I'm not really sure where the logical connection is there. The idea that you can't basically give lower stakes players or new players tons of benefits without taking away from the Supernova Elites. And the thing is also, like, the Supernova Elites, like, a lot of them aren't winning money at the games. They're only making money from their rake back, right? So, like, their presence in the game, like, they're just paying rake and then getting some of the rake back, Like, they're not taking money out of the games. Stars was taking money out of the games, which is fine. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying that, like I'm not like an extremist here. I don't think Stars should just not charge rake or something. But it's just like I don't like the idea that the balance has to be shifted, and therefore it has to come out of the most high volume players. I don't know. I don't really buy that necessarily. I'm not sure where there's that connection.
Right. Okay. So the other thing to consider, and I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast, is that when PokerStars was run by Esai and Mark, it was a private company. They didn't have they were not on the stock market. They didn't have a stock price to look at. But once you go public, you have different responsibilities to the company to make sure that the profit margins look the way they're supposed to look, to make sure you meet projections and things like that. So whoever took over, right, whether it was Amaya or anybody else, like, once that happened, they went public, like, it's assumed that changes are going to happen in terms of, like, the way in which the company looks to flourish. So part of the thing they're doing, obviously, is getting into casino. They got into Stars Draft with this, and I don't believe that, like, poker is an afterthought or that they're, like, abandoning that. I definitely think they're looking to, like, cut, as you said, some of the expenditures that maybe were, like, a little. I mean, I think to some degree, like, they got to the point where they were excessively generous to the point where it became unsustainable long term, right? Like, eventually something was going to need to change, because if you don't continue to, like, spend marketing dollars to bring in new players, the liquidity shrinks, the player base shrinks, and then those players you were talking about that can't break even now, even without the benefits, they would just all be worse off. So I think they're thinking, again, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, is that spending a lot more money on marketing will bring in a lot more players that could help the ecosystem down the road.
But if you think about, like, Stars' history and what made Stars become PokerStars, the thing that separated them from other sites was that they did market to pros, and they marketed, like, and promoted the idea of being a pro-owned site, and that's what, like, launched Stars into being enormous. So I don't know what exactly that necessarily has changed about the industry that necessitates that they no longer market to pros or no longer create an environment that's friendly to pros. Maybe it's because poker itself, the boom has shrunk or whatever, or has not kept up. but I don't know that marketing strategy all of a sudden just becomes useless. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like everybody, when we have like when people have conversations about this, they're like, oh, well, look at all these other sites that market to fish and not to pros. It's just like, yeah, you really want PokerStars to become more like iPoker or more like On Game? Like, I don't really understand how that's even like. It's crazy to me that people present that as an argument. Like, it's like, well, those sites have like 1,500 people on at peak. PokerStars has like 130,000. So I don't know why they've all of a sudden decided that the way they've been going about it is wrong.
No, and I totally get what you're saying. Changing your marketing philosophy and who you market to is a massive gamble. It's a huge risk. I've conveyed that message to them in terms of, especially from a PR perspective. Like, aside from the strike and all the efforts that you've been putting forth to try to like make a difference and create noise, like, it just looks bad. And from a stock price perspective, like, having your core loyal customers who have been for many years speaking out against the company and threatening boycotts and all those kind of things, that's something that is a major gamble. So when I speak to them, I have them look at these numbers and make sure they really understand what they're doing by making these changes happen now. Again, long term, I feel like it needs a lot more study and a lot more eyeballs on exactly how these changes will play out, because the risk is major, and I acknowledge what you're saying, in that PokerStars was created in the way that it was because it did market to pros and said, like, this is a place you can go and move up in stakes and become a pro. And if that's no longer the case, which again, it feels like, right, because of some of the changes don't necessarily bode well for professional players, then it's a huge gamble. Will it work for the company? That remains to be seen. Does it work for the pro players who have been loyal to them for a long time? Certainly not in the short term. There's no question. So, I acknowledge that just a huge gamble, and I don't know that they're fully taking in how damaging that is to a brand that's always honored promises to now breaking one. And that's what I've been discussing for about a month now. Most importantly.
Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. Appreciate Daniel once again. I just want to say I do appreciate Daniel coming on. Obviously, having this type of back and forth. No one else is probably going to be willing to do something like this. So, I think it is good. Even if I think you guys agree on a lot of things, and I think you guys might be agreeing on different parts of things, and might not, clearly be understanding on some things. I think the conversation's still good. I mean, you never really know who's listening to this. I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch this. I'm sure a lot of people, maybe some of the guys from PokerStars, maybe some of the guys who are, maybe some decision makers or some people who do have influence on decision makers might hear some of the things that Donnie's saying to Daniel, and then maybe think about it, and it might have some sort of impact for the positive from someone's perspective in the future. So I think this type of conversation is pretty good to have, and once again, I do appreciate both you guys coming on.
I mean, this conversation is great to have, and PokerStars used to love to have these kinds of conversations with its players. And the fact is, like, Daniel is a paid representative of PokerStars, but he's not PokerStars. He's not the people that are actually like in the offices of Isle of Man making these decisions. And Stars players used to actually have their ear. There used to be player meetings, and I don't know to what extent how much change ever happened with them, but at least the very idea of them used to be something that gave us at least gave us the idea that PokerStars was listening to us and had some interest in us as part of their customer base. And while I very much appreciate Daniel doing this on like a personal level, in terms of like what that means from our opinion, the player's opinion of PokerStars, it basically means jack shit. Because he's making this decision as on his own. Right, and he's not making this decision like as a representative of Stars. It's like he said at the beginning, like nobody else would do this. He's doing it because this is, a Daniel thing to do, to just have open dialogue about something like this. That's like a touchy issue for somebody like him who's probably being paid tons of money by Stars.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess I made my point that it doesn't really address our grievances really.
Yeah, I will say that, and I hear what you're saying, but I do think that stuff like this is good because it connects the dots a little bit. And like you said, if you feel as though the connection to them hasn't been as solidified as it was in the past, like I would wager that they will see this, right? And I do think too that me being a representative of the company, right, taking a stand that isn't exactly aligned with the vision that they're putting forth. I don't know what it'll do publicly, but one of the reasons I wanted to come on here was because I've tried a lot of different things, right? And I've been doing my best to try to affect change, and I've run into some obstacles and things like that. So, if this is something that could help in any way, shape, or form, then it's why I wanted to do it. I'm frankly, I'm embarrassed about all this, like immensely, with my face and name being on the company, and them, handling this with the communication that they have. It's just embarrassing. I'm apologetic in the sense that, like, I'm sorry I can't make all the decisions because I wish that I could, because they would look a lot different than they do right now. And I can only say that, like, I've been literally uncovering every rock that I can to figure out ways to affect change. So this is another one of those rocks, essentially, which is, I don't know. Like, it's been. I'm very frustrated. I don't know if that's evident, but I'm pretty frustrated with how this is playing out, and I'm just going to continue hammering at them and see what comes of it.
Yeah, no, and I've mostly defended you on Twitter and things like that, where I think like a lot of people have expectations. That's kind of like the point I was making, is that like I very much appreciate what you're doing, like on a personal level, and I think and I hope that it'll help. And I know, obviously, like I've had conversations with you, not public conversations, and I'm able to convince you of certain information, and then you can pass that along to stars, and they can listen or not listen. But and I very much appreciate that we have you able to talk to them. The only point I was making is that, like, from like the perspective of the players and people who are out, and very nervous about these changes and very nervous about the direction that Stars is going, we wish there was a lot more dialogue with them, basically. And it's like I said, I think I said this the other day when I was talking about the strike on podcast. Like, we don't want to hate Stars. Like, we want we're boycotting because we want Stars to be our home. Like, we want to play our hands on Pokerstars, and we feel like we can't. And they're going to end up pushing us away, and we want to like voice that, Like, all these people who are striking, like, you look at the list. I mean, it's some people. It's like, I play $10 no limit, and I have 300 VPPs on the year. And then there's other people who are like, I have 10 million VPPs lifetime. I've been Supernova every single elite every single year for the last like 8 years. Like, that's somebody who, like, if you looked at those numbers, you'd think, well, this guy loves Pokerstars. This guy loves to play on Pokerstars. He likes the company. He feels like this is the best place to play. So for somebody like that to be going on strike, I think it's basically like I don't want to say it's sad, but it's they clearly feel like they've been put in a position that they have to do it, and that their voice is just not being heard in any other way.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that some of the arguments you've made, some of the other arguments I've read on the forums, have made it directly to the people that are making the decisions. And they've, a big reason for that is me directly sending them and adding some comments of my own in terms of how I view, or a lot of times just completely agree with what's being written. And I've like solicited feedback on all the different arguments that that I've had conversations with you and others about ways of approaching it so they can understand fully exactly what's happening. So not that I think that's not adequate, though, compared to what you're saying before, in that players themselves who are actually playing, rather than having a buffer, someone like me or someone could go directly to them and say, guys, here's where we're at. So that culture shift, I believe, happened when the company changed over, and clearly it's led to players feeling like their concerns are not being heard, and they're not having as much input. And I think there's some truth to that. And I think that a lot of these decisions aren't being vetted by people who fully understand how the poker ecosystem works. Because I've heard some things, right, on the other side where they have some ideas about what they want to create, and then I explain to them, like, okay, but by doing that, you'll create the exact opposite of that, right? Like one being, you know, protecting the guy who's being targeted at high stakes by, you know, a waiting list of 35 people and games only running when he plays. You know, explaining to them that this makes it way worse. Like, if you think bum hunting is bad now, it would be exponentially worse if regs had no interest in playing each other because the edges were too small. The rake was, you know, the edge wasn't big enough to beat rake, especially without any sort of bonuses. So the arguments are being delivered to them, and it's a slow process of, like, you know, having people who don't play poker really understand kind of like, when they look at something, right, you take somebody from outside the poker world, like business people, they look at this and they go, they see the ecosystem, and there's some screwed up shit, right? You look at the lobby, you know, you see one game with 87 people on a waiting list, then you see like heads-up games where there's like 70 people, there's only one of two, nobody's playing each other. You look at that and you go, something's broken here, right? Like, just, you know, you look at that and go, something's broken here. Now the problem is, some of the ideas to fix it don't work, right? And they can't know that without having player input. So I think that's definitely important, especially going forward or in this process. And as you know, and I acknowledge this too, like, I'm not the guy who has my pulse on that world as much as you do, or, you know, some of the other players that I've spoken to. So I've been educating myself on it through these discussions and things like that, and then conveying that message to them. Ultimately, I don't know how this rolls out, but I'm going to continue to, you know, do what I can.
Yeah, it sounds like from people in the chat were saying, it sounds like the people who are making the decisions really have no idea what's happening for them. Like, it sounds like they're just sort of clicking buttons, right? They sound kind of like a fish in a way. They're just clicking buttons and just like making decisions and sort of seeing what happens. And
well, the key difference is Isai Scheinberg. Like, I played poker with him when I was 17 years old. He was a poker player. Like, I played with him in Toronto growing up. Like, the people that ran the company, they were like actual poker players. Now the company's been taken over by people who are not, you know, poker players. So, like, the learning curve is different. They're approaching it like a business, and they're looking at, okay, let's make cuts here, let's do this, let's streamline it, let's make the company more effective, and forgetting to some degree, like, or just not understanding fully, as we've discussed, how poker works and how the decisions will play out.
Donnie, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I have plenty of more things I want to say. The hope that I could get on here and have like a screaming argument with Daniel, I guess their hopes were dashed. But just that, like, I want to just like use an example of like, so earlier this year I went to a meeting with Stars and with other players to deal with seeding scripts and and more of like the general like predatory nature of pros, and how we can combat that and sort of combat bum hunting and like, I think a lot of people on Twitter that the very few people that I have had disagreeing with me, a lot of them seem to think that this is like a battle between like the Stars protecting their recreational players versus the pros, and it's really not the case. And if you look like throughout the history of like how seeding scripts have gotten like much worse over the years, like Pokerstars basically explicitly allowed scripts, and you see on the forums like all the regulars like screaming like, why is this allowed? Why is this allowed? Please stop this. It makes it a horrible experience for the recreational player. The recreational player sits down and instantly 5 seats fill up. Like, it's just a terrible experience. It looks bad. It makes us look like we're team playing them. And this is even coming from people who use scripts, I've seen, who are like, well, I have to use a script because everybody else uses one, but I still think it sucks, you know? And so the tone of this meeting, the reason I'm bringing this up, is players were interested in creating a better playing environment, and Stars was interested in hearing players' thoughts on how to do that, right? And especially now, if like we're hearing that Stars is just like no longer has any poker players in the company, now is like a more important time than ever that they like should incorporate us with ideas of how to like improve the playing environment and show us some data. Because obviously, look, like, we don't have the data that they have. They can look at everything and they can draw conclusions. But a lot of the time, they're going to draw conclusions based on assumptions that are probably wrong because they're not poker players and they don't know what we know about how something will happen. Like during the meetings, we were coming up with we were coming up with ideas for how to combat scripting. And like a stars rep would say like, okay, well, what if you do this, this, and this? And then like the players would immediately be like, no, 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 you can't do that because this is how the bomb hunters think. They're going to come up with a counter strategy by doing this. And then they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And it's just like we're there. We're in the trenches. We know what's happening. We know how like players are going to react. We know what's happened. What the environment needs and what like looks bad. And for them to just, like I said, this boycott. It's about the betrayal of Supernova Elites, and it's about the VPP changes, and it's about the FPP changes. But it's also about the tone of the company and the way they've shifted. And I really want to emphasize that. Like we're asking for like it to return at least a little bit to the way it was, And I think that meeting that I went to was like it gave me a great idea of like why players were like actually needed and why there's so much input needed from players, because and it's not to say that the employees didn't know anything either. They would they would tell us the same thing. Like we'd come up with an idea and they'd be like, no, you can't do that because of this factor that we have data on that we know, It was a two-way street, and it was like really valuable, and I learned a lot about like how to deal with some of these issues, and I'm sure they did too. And
I would echo that and say that one of the first conversations I had with the higher ups was, in terms of why they're, the rakebacks being cut for Supernova Elites and what the reasoning was. And originally, the reasoning was because, and this is them saying this, not me, that it created a playing style where you got played to not play poker. It promoted a style where people just, were getting paid to fold and not play poker. And so I explained to them, I said that if you think lowering rakeback for Supernova Elites from 63 to 45% will all of a sudden have them completely change the style in which they play poker, it won't. It won't at all. It won't have any effect whatsoever. So, the idea that what that showed me was that they don't fully understand, like, and I said, listen, I'm a poker player. I have been a professional poker player for many years, and I know that if rakeback was 63% or 45%, it's not going to drastically affect the way that I play poker. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, of course not.
Like, it's going to have virtually no effect. It's like what you think by doing this, you think you're going to create something, it will not work. You will not just all of a sudden change the way a Supernova Elite plays because you've lowered his VPPs a little bit. It's not like he's all of a sudden going to be a wild and goofy, player who's playing all these hands. And that's essentially what, at the outset, that's what they thought this would help create. And obviously, if as a poker player, anyone could tell them, no, that's not how it works. But that's frustrating for sure.
And I just want to like add on to that, like, if they think, I mean, you can talk about however you want, but the way poker is progressing and moving forward online, and the way game theory is dictating that play styles become a certain way, and basically at the high stakes people are becoming really good, and then that information slowly moves down to. Can you mute his mic, Joey? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's on
feedback.
That was me. Sorry.
Okay.
So if you, still there.
All right, go ahead, Donnie.
Okay. So if you and basically people just start getting better and play. I think a lot of people think it's robotic or something, but it's not. It's not what it is. It's just people being better, and maybe it seems like a more boring style. Like, sorry that people stop 3-betting 10-3 suited. That's not becoming robotic. That's just not playing bad anymore, And that's just going to continue to happen. And that's an inevitable outcome of online poker. It's going to keep getting harder because people are thinking about the game and working on the game, and it's just going to keep people are just going to keep getting better. The idea that attacking Supernova Elites or even HUDs and scripts like that, going after those is somehow going to regress the game. It's kind of crazy. Like any idea that they think they can do something to regress the game seems really silly, because it's just going to keep going forward.
Yeah, no argument here. I mean, the bottom line is that when during the heyday, right, when poker was hot and there's tons of people playing, none of this was an issue at all, because there's rake wasn't really an issue, benefits weren't an issue because everything was great. Now we have to look at things a little bit differently. and fix things, but we have to fix it from a place of understanding the poker ecosystem properly. And if you don't know poker, that is a roadblock to fully understanding what changes will mean and how they will play out. So.
Well, I hope that I'm listening to the feedback. I hope that Pokerstars maybe listens to some of those ideas and at least thinks about communicating with the players a little bit better. Maybe somebody like Donnie could be in, communication. I don't know if that's even a possible thing, but maybe actually them being, it's really weird talking with when you hear yourself talk. It's crazy. Let me put it on mute again. But yeah, maybe something like there'll be some sort. I know there are players that do work for the company that are former players that are working on some level at Pokerstars. I'm not sure if their voice really has, carries much weight, in the company anymore. But I guess we as players can hope that the communication better, that people that understand online poker specifically will be able to have more of a voice in the decision making in the future. And I'm not sure if that's a likely scenario. Daniel, do you think that's actually a likely scenario to happen?
You mean for players to have direct contact with the higher ups?
For someone that understands poker to have direct contact with some of the higher ups, that understands the online ecosystem on a good level.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's always been part of what made PokerStars successful for all those years before the move, was the fact that they would always have meetings with the crew from the forums, and they would go over to Isle of Man and sort of go over whatever issues are happening. And I wasn't aware that stopped happening. I mean, Donnie mentioned that he just was at he had a discussion about that a little while ago on seed scripting. I knew about that. I didn't realize that wasn't still happening. So that's something that I'll definitely bring up on my call and see if that can affect some sort of positive change going forward in that area.
Okay, well, if you guys want to follow along with everything that's happening, the upcoming strike, there's a thread in News Use Gossip on 2+2. Has all the information in there. I'm sure there's multiple other threads on 2+2. If you want to get in touch with Donnie, he's been really good at responding to people, whether they agree with him or disagree with him, on Twitter at @TheRealLansky. If you want to get in touch with Daniel on Twitter, Real Kid Poker, and I'm sure we potentially have a blog post coming here in the near future, correct, Daniel?
Yeah. Well, I mean, essentially, we spent, I don't know, an hour and a half going over a lot of the things that would be in the blog in terms of my views about what the decisions mean and what's happening. The blog post hopefully will have more information in terms of what comes of this, which is why I've been holding off, whether or not we can make some changes to the current changes, or if nothing comes of it at all. There's 2 blogs written there. Like I said, there's 3 blogs written in my head. One is an amazing one that's really one makes me happy. One is okay, well, better than nothing, and the other one is not good. So I'm hoping obviously to write the good one that makes people happy, and myself included.
Donnie, any last words for yourself?
I'm hoping for the good blog too.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming on, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. If you just joined us late, you want to go back to the replay, you can go watch it back from the beginning pretty much right now. Just scroll the bar to the end and follow along, guys. Should be interesting. So thanks for tuning in. Adios. Peace out. Much love.
All right.
See you guys later.
See you guys.